Welcome to another episode of the JUSTUS podcast. Once again, it'll just be the dynamic duo, as expected.
Let's go!
For today's episode, we'll be taking a look at Venom, There Be Carnage, Star Wars The Bad Batch, and Transformers Robots in Disguise, the 2001 version. Yep. Let's go from left to right as always and begin with Venom 2. Now, when I saw the movie a couple of times, like 2 or 3 times, most likely 3, I'm kind of busy with my life trying to get things in order, I pretty much had a couple of thoughts regarding how the film turned out because while there is a part of me that likes to say that this is on par with how film Twitter likes to call this cinema, even though it may not be like the kind of cinema that you'd expect big name reviewers
Not
to talk about.
the Scorsese type of cinema where he's,
Yep.
moving upwards his hand and looking at the camera. Not that type of cinema.
Yeah. But like, I can't join on either side. Like, I enjoyed Venom 2, but I honestly can't say that it's like the definitive movie of all time from Sony, nor do I really hate it. There are things I like more about this one more than I do the first one, but the things I like more about the first one more than I do the second one. Let's start off with the
Shoot.
story. Story-wise, I think Venom 2 does a great job of making the plot a little more interesting. After the lesser-known Riot did his role as the antagonist, we get to see Venom and Carnage have to deal with not one but two threats. One of them being Carnage himself, and the other one being Scream, who may not be a symbiote or possess a symbiote, but is nonetheless a major threat because of her power.
Yeah, that's especially that superpower that goes against, all symbiotes.
Yeah, and I like the fact that we get to see their beginning. Um, the way that they were separated at one point, and the fact that it was under the assumption that everyone thought that uh, that Scream was dead, but turns out that she's been sent away, and they've been separated for so long that Cletus pretty much wishes to be with Scream, considering the fact that she was, as he described, a ray of sunlight amongst the dark, or something along those lines.
Hmm.
Basically, he loves her a lot, and she was the one that made him run through the treatment that they had at the um, foster home ever since they got together.
Wait, sorry, man. Am I like producing an echo or something? Because
No, not really.
no,
They seem to be good on my end, but
because it seemed like I was producing like a sound, or at least that was the Discord signal. I'll put some headphones just in case there.
already. But either way,
Yeah.
regarding the two um, antagonists themselves, we get to see them reunite later on. But in the meantime, we have to see the way Venom and Eddie Brock have to live together. They meet up with a police officer who would later on totally become Toxin. But he pretty much is trying to tell Eddie that he's likely to be able to dig into all the details regarding Cletus Cassidy because he's infamous for being a serial killer, notorious for
Yeah.
committing such violent acts and for having a high kill count as well. Eddie Brock is pretty much the one with the balls to go up against him. And during the interviews, I mean, we already saw that regarding the post-credit scene for the original Venom movie.
Yeah. When he goes to the maximum security psych ward, and there he finds Cletus.
Yep, pretty much the mindset of saying stuff like, "You better tell the world that there's going to be carnage," Interestingly, Carnage, or rather Cletus Cassidy, has his like signature curly hair like trimmed off, giving him an entirely new haircut and kind of a new vibe from him. Like you get creepy killer clown feelings from his appearance in the first Venom movie during his cameo, and here you get like a more dead serious, no nonsense serial killer mindset that I think would make people want to run away from him if they ever have the chance,
Yeah.
if they, assuming they can. But that being said, like the approach between the two appearances is like very different. Yet I think it's even worse with the fact that Cletus Cassidy definitely shows how much of a threat he is when he went up against Eddie. It doesn't even help by the fact that Venom was pretty much trying to butt in. Like Venom wants more control about how they can handle stuff, while Eddie tries to make himself like the more reasoned of the two. Like they're kind of like a like some weird buddy cop couple.
Huh.
You have one that's pretty much more like a good cop. The other one is more like a bad cop. But they're more like reporters, journalists. Probably the best journalists out there. To tell you the truth, Venom would probably be more of an aggressive one, if we were to be honest. That being
Wait,
said,
better than Peter Parker?
well, Peter Parker doesn't exist in their universe. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. This thing about the Sony universe of Marvel characters or Sony Spider-Man universe is strange because we don't know which Spider-Man is even in this universe. Well, apart from Tom Holland, but they just get transported there. Oh, what did I just say?
You don't know which Spider-Man is in that universe.
We'll save that for later. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like the way the two of them like interact with one another. Admittedly, um, the movie's duration may not be long enough to make you want to see more of that, but we'll get into the duration of the film later. Again, that being said, I do like the way we see um, Eddie Brock and Venom have beef with each other. Like pretty much originally, the film's mindset was that Eddie Brock and Venom were just like stuck together. There's no other way out. And I think it's explained by the fact that because Eddie Brock has had like a shitty life, pretty shit faced look to him, that he can't really live without the Venom symbiote bonded to him. When the two of them were separated in this film, um, maybe he was able to adapt better because like he's been adapted to it for so long that he's stronger even without it.
Hmm.
Maybe it's weird. Like
Yeah.
maybe I'm misremembering what happened in the first movie, but that's the feeling I get because everyone else like doesn't live as long as Eddie Brock does, or even the ex of Eddie. They did it again.
He did it again.
But anyways, I like the fact that we get to continue off with Eddie Brock and Venom still like being at odds with each other in terms of how they live. Like their apartment definitely looks nicer than it was previously, but you got to admit that things like the tire swing, the chickens, and all the M&Ms are kind of getting out of left field because Venom himself is kind of like the more demanding of the two, and as one would expect, no one is like really that surprised to see something like uh, how one would expect the two of them to like be together because even if they know how to like adapt to each other one way or another, you still get a scene like where Eddie Brock and Venom argue with each other while they're in the ladies' room by accident. So they still have that sort of like sort of um, craziness that goes on between them. I can't really think of a good comparison. The closest one I could think of would probably be saying that Eddie Brock uh, and Venom are kind of like when you have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde like pops out of nowhere and tries to be the one in control. while Dr. Jekyll will try and like keep him away from danger or from anyone else. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
kind of like
yeah, additionally, I have to say that it was kind of funny to see Eddie Brock try and go for action, and unfortunately struggle with resisting the urge to bite a thug's head off, which I think he kind of justified, but at the same time, if he were to do that, then they'd get chased after by the feds, especially considering the fact that they know what's been going on and they're trying to look for who's responsible. And hell, there's even a line um, where Eddie Brock is told that whenever something crazy happens, he either disappears or pops in.
yeah,
It's kind of amusing, and it kind of plays into the sort of like like double identity aspect of superheroes. But it's even crazier for someone like Venom because whereas Spider Man and Superman and Batman would pretty much be the ones that would save the day, Venom is more of a chaotic lethal protector.
true.
Plus,
Chaotic neutral.
yeah, chaotic neutral indeed. And and I'm pretty sure like if this was Batman's doing, if he was the kind of guy that would like bite off people's heads or decapitate them, then film Twitter would pretty much like piss come and shit itself like little cunts. That's pretty sad. Which, and also sad is the fact that poor Venom separated himself from Eddie Brock when the two split up after a chaotic argument between them in a small fight, which I think is kind of like amusing that even if he didn't have as much um, reaction time or strength, Eddie Brock still won out in the end.
Yeah, kind of like in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, pretty much the symbiote to Doc Ock's tentacles, and
Yeah,
the Eddie Brock to Spidey himself. After all that, we get to see like Eddie Brock try and solve these issues on his own, while the Venom symbiote enjoys his life, and we get readings or news regarding the fact that at one point before all this happened, Cletus bites into Eddie's arm and gets a bit of the taste of his blood, which is no ordinary blood, and what should have been the execution of Cletus results in the birth of Carnage.
no.
All right, what are your thoughts on Carnage?
My thoughts or
Yep,
your thoughts?
your thoughts.
My thought is that I have not seen the movie, but I did like a lot all the visuals that I did see, and I think that Woody Harrelson is cool. I don't know what you think.
Well, I'll go into this more. Uh, Cletus Cassidy and Carnage make a great duo. I mean, I already like the duo between Venom and Eddie Brock, but it's also great that the two of them are pretty much um, different. You get like it's more than just player one versus player two. It's more of a case between you have one character who's um, got his own attributes, his own personality, and the other is more distinct in terms of how they act. I mean, the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom is more, like I mentioned, like a buddy cop film, whereas
Yeah,
the bond between um, Cletus Cassidy and Carnage you would think would be better because they seem more on the same page, but it turns out that there's one fatal flaw that will ruin everything. You think the
like
fact that Eddie Brock is stopping Venom from eating heads is bad? Well, wait till you see the devotion that Cletus has towards his girlfriend and the hatred that Carnage develops.
yeah,
kind of like makes you kind of reminds you of something, doesn't it? From another story.
Mm, you tell me. I'm a bit lost.
Well, I'm gonna try and give a good example in this case. Uh, you ever get that mindset where where someone makes a deal about what should happen if something were to go well, but if it doesn't go as planned, then they start to rip everything apart.
Yeah.
That's the sort of feeling I get from the team that between the chemistry of Carnage and Cletus. As we already know, symbiotes are afraid of fire and they also hate loud noises. So having Scream involved into the equation should hypothetically make them a trio of terror, yet they result in a terrible mess as a result of one character having a power that affects the other one, which will ruin everything as a whole. So basically, it's like when you have like it'd be like when you're trying to put in a square peg for a round hole. The end result would hypothetically be interesting if you were to try to make this weird combination, but when you forget about the vital weakness that one piece has that the other one is not aware of, and then you have a devotion towards said piece that the other one hates, you're going to get a love triangle that's going to break down in pieces within seconds.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. In short, Cletus loves Scream. Scream is hated by Carnage, and Cletus just doesn't want him to do any harm. Simple as that. But after all this mess that they make, after the two of them team up, we get to see Eddie Brock try and reach out to everybody and see what they can do, while at the same time, the ex and her new boyfriend or fiance try to look for Venom after the two of them split up. And considering the fact that Venom's pretty much needed to help save the day, well, let's just say that the interaction between um, the two of them is pretty hilarious. I mean, it kind of makes sense because of the fact that the chemistry between Eddie Brock and Venom is pretty um, silly at best. It's hilarious. Well, it's it's a Venom symbiote relationship. That's the best I can come up with. But I like the fact
Yeah.
that uh, we once again get to see the return of um, She Venom. Now, I'm pretty sure we all went nuts over that scene when we first saw it in theaters because, well, you're either going to be surprised that there is a female version of Venom, or that there is an actual comic reference to show you the fact that Sony is more than just a corporate, and there's people that actually are aware of the stories that the characters are in. Or you're going to meet the kind of people like certain individuals on comic book, Bird app, whatever, that are just going to simp for them before they get all depressed with those sad dog memes. Now, I don't know which side of the camp you fall on, but I personally believe that it's actually kind of funny that we see her again because I wasn't expecting them to bring her back. But hey, we get to see the return of uh, the lady, Mrs. Chang. So, like, why not bring everything else that was brought over? Well, apart from certain characters that weren't brought back. Either way, it's just kind of hilarious how that turned out. And, well, we didn't get to see them um, kiss. We at least got to see the fact that Eddie Brock was doing whatever he can to try and win Venom over. But until then, it was funny to see Mrs. Chang get possessed by the Venom symbiote, and the fact that the X got to clearly tell does show that she may have the same sort of secret sort of cinema that Teddy has. without the symbiote. I mean, they both know how to last long without, even when they're not bonded to him. It's just kind of funny how that turned out. Also, I think in the newspaper section,
Oh,
I think
what the fuck?
even without like you have to say that blooper. Okay, one thing I found interesting during the scenes that involved Mrs. Chang was the fact that they have a newspaper for Stan Lee, or at least I think there was a newspaper that had Stan Lee's face on it.
Oh yeah, there was a friend of mine said the same. Like he he got told by his friend, and the two of them figured out. But I think nobody in the cinema kind of saw that
I spotted
little
it.
Easter. Yeah,
Then again, like there's not much for me to worry about. I mean, the more I saw the film, the more I got to see it, and like I'm kind of surprised that they still reference him. I mean, I know they can't do live action cameos anymore because he sadly passed away back in 2018. But I do think that visual aids for Stan Lee or visual references to him are not out of the question. So
true.
a picture of a magazine or maybe a photo album are suitable, yet live action cameos like from the old days are unacceptable, which is how it should be. Respect the man. Anyways, back to the film itself. We get straight into the final battle, which I think was actually longer than the previous one. And I kind of like the creativity of it more. I mean, the final battle between Venom and Riot from the first movie felt more on par with what we saw with Iron Man versus Ironmonger and Incredible Hulk versus Abomination, where they're good final battles, but not quite as memorable as you'd hope they would be.
Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong, I still like the first Iron Man movie, and I still like the Incredible Hulk, but their final battles are nowhere near as like iconic to me as the final battles of Spider-Man in the first movie against the Green Goblin, or the X-Men versus the Brotherhood of Mutants in the first X-Men movie.
yeah, I agree. I mean, those movies are better well known because of how they develop more than the final fights and stuff. So yeah,
But that being said, I did enjoy the battle between um, like Cletus Cassidy as well as Carnage and Scream compared to Venom and his human friends. Like the first battle is pretty much like a guy that just gets bonded to a symbiote versus an evil CEO of a company that wants more power versus um, and whereas this time it's more so Venom and Venom and Eddie Brock going up against a crazy ass serial killer and his girlfriend with a sonic scream. And I like the fact that they're both in the wedding. And it's even funny. Like I just thought about this. Has anyone ever thought of making an edit where Trash Brock from Spider-Man 3 shows up, and once Peter Parker dead, yet the symbiote battle's going on? It was just this is going to be on purpose. Like, and maybe like I'm not as like in depth in the older comics as I want as it should be, but I swear that because Venom is well known for showing up in a church, and because of the symbiotes, and many people recognize like the bells that make the symbiote freak out. It makes me wonder if they were inspired by that sort of scene. Maybe they're not, but it's just kind of something that comes to my mind because Raimi Trilogy is one of the significant temples or the totem poles of Spider-Man lore. But you already know that.
yeah,
Either way, this final battle was like pretty awesome. I like the fact that we get to see them go from symbiote to human, and we get to see the symbiotes develop. Also nice that even though Riot may have been like a prototype Carnage, you get to see Carnage's true self develop more because like Carnage is not just a red Venom. Like he is his own guy. He's leaner. He's meaner. He has more attacks to him. Like he's more like, if I were to make a good comparison, he's more like if you had the powers of a wiry monkey, whereas Venom had more of the strength of a silverback gorilla. Like that's the best comparison I have. But it makes sense in considering the fact that, or maybe like Carnage would be more comparable to an orangutan because similar coloring and whatnot.
Monkey.
But like you get what I mean. Just by the way, like the fight styles make me think of like primates, how they'd fight if they were possessed by symbiotes, or if they were possessed with like enhanced strength and agility.
Monkey.
Yep. But either way,
Sorry.
it makes sense. And I also like the fact that Scream helps out every once in a while, although she gets sidelined at times. Not entirely. Most of her attention is just put to her trying to like pull out the eye of the cop that got her eye messed up, while the ex and her boyfriend try to help Venom win the fight using fire on Carnage, which does work for a bit, but the fight still continues. And it gets even crazier when you see the fact that the Carnage symbiote starts going around the church. It's just chaotic everywhere. It's insane, and I absolutely like the way everyone tried to use what they can to go up against Carnage. And people may think, oh, like this new weakness is is like just because of the human aspect of Cletus, but it makes sense. Like it's not entirely corny in a way. Like if there's some sort of random opening that just pops up and boom, the villain's like easy to take down. Like they tried their best and they did what they can. And it's not like Carnage got taken down so easily because of it. Like they had to build up to his defeat. And considering the fact that their asses were getting beaten more often than they were losing, um, and I think it makes perfect sense for the fight to later on be on the side of Venom. Plus, it's not like Carnage is just some sort of stupid, um, mind bending villain that warps everything and then suddenly loses like a mere punch. I mean, inside of Carnage, there's still a human being, a fucked up human being, but a human being nonetheless. Plus, they clearly
Yeah.
established the fact that whatever hatred Carnage has towards Scream will also affect Cletus as well.
I mean, inevitably, yeah.
Yeah, like that was a rule that they made from the start. It's not like they just forced it in there to make some sort of Deus Ex Machina. Like that was right there from the beginning. And surprisingly, Venom not only consumes a Carnage symbiote after it's been taken down, but they also kill Cletus. Which, like, that fucking surprised me because you'd think they'd save him for a sequel.
Wow. Yikes.
Yeah, that was shocking, honestly. And and they said they appreciate like seeing Carnage, like Venom, not only get what he's always wanted, that being someone else's head, but for him to be like, oh fuck this guy, before he eats up his head. And after all that,
Damn.
interestingly, the ex and her boyfriend decide to like meet up um, with the federal law enforcement, while Eddie, Brock, and Venom run away. But I think it's for the best. After all this damage that has been going on, maybe they should escape from society. And it clearly established that at the end of the film, as Venom and Eddie Brock now live on an island. Or perhaps somewhere else,
Yeah.
separated from society. Being like, I still kind of like lost track of what happened after we saw them like feeding the chickens. But at least it was a nice way for them to like move on from all the craziness that happens in San Francisco. Because let's be real here, whatever shit happens in their former city, like they gotta escape from so that they don't end up getting caught up, even though they're kind of like lethal protectors of sorts.
Mm.
But yeah, like during the credits, we get ourselves a pretty cool like paint style, a paint splotch style background, as well as Last One Standing, which features Eminem, and I gotta say it's pretty good. Definitely easier to sing than Venom from Eminem himself, even though that one's iconic, but for the wrong reasons. Simply because like it's just so damn hard to sing. I mean, Eminem is just fucking impossible to like mimic.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. Like, how the fuck do you sing like that? Like, you gotta be a god to sing as good as him. Then again, Eminem is like probably got a better speech rate than I do. I mean, I'm too casual to sing a rap song like that. But after all this, the film gives us an initial, um, well, it seems like a pretty simple post-credit scene or mid-credit scene. With until Lady Brock mentions, oh, there's something that symbiotes can do regarding the universe, and suddenly they get teleported to another world, which I think because they kind of kind of lost focus on what happened at that point. Maybe them being in the island was because of them living in or being teleported. We'll see.
Oh
But
crap.
they suddenly get to be on a different house or different environment, and as it turns out, they pretty much have to contend with them being in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and surprisingly, they also get to see a scene, maybe it's new footage, where like because I haven't seen Far From Home, I don't want to watch even after this. But
Damn. Been a
like
long time.
yeah, but they're watching the reveal where J. Jonah Jameson reveals that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, aka Tom Holland. And I remember when people were talking about those deleted Instagram posts by Tom Hardy where it shows him biting off the head of Spider-Man or ripping him to shreds.
Yeah, yeah.
Like at first I thought, oh, this is gonna, oh, like I think he just wants like to kill off that Spider-Man, but maybe it all makes sense now. Like they're like maybe this tease up was actually a lot sooner than they expected. But yeah, this is nuts. Honestly, like I didn't expect them to do something like this. I mean, it's already crazy that they're going to bring in um, all this like craziness of like the two older Spider-Man actors, as well as the villains from their universes, Doctor Strange, and potentially Daredevil in No Way Home, and on top of all the crazy shit that's going to happen in like Multiverse of Madness from Doctor Strange. But Venom, that's kind of like unexpected if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
But I guess it kind of makes sense in a way because to be honest, Venom feels more like an older MCU film, like, but in a good way because you compare the modern day MCU stuff. It's more so obsessed with trying to make Easter eggs and hyping up other stuff for new films instead of trying to make itself look like a worthy film. The opposite is ironic with the DCEU because the DCEU or the Hamadaverse doesn't even know what it fucking wants to be.
The
But both
metaverse.
but both franchises suffer from one thing: being worthwhile films that you can revisit no problem. Because um like I can revisit a lot of Marvel films and DC films of the 2000s. Not as much as I can of the 2010s because with a few exceptions, mostly um, Guardians 1 if a friend wants me to watch it, or Days of Future Past if I want to watch it on my own, or Logan, or the Amazing Spider-Man films, or of course the Snyderverse stuff. Most of the films in the 2010s for the comic book stuff were pretty meh in terms of rewatches. Like you watch them once, you get crazy over them, you buy all the merch, then you like go to the next one, and it just doesn't feel quite as satisfying, if you ask me.
So you think that Venom 2 resembles more what the MC formula is, or is it still like the first Venom?
It's like the first Venom where it knows that it wants to be or it's trying to be less about the Easter eggs constantly. Like it's more so just
Yeah,
trying to be a damn good film. Like
yeah,
they're not trying to make themselves like a new MCU. They just want to make a nice film series. And people would be like, "Oh, why can you expect this for Venom, but have like all these expectations for DCEU?" Difference is Venom, like the Spider-Man universe, like who knows what will happen, but so long as Venom gets a good story, then I'm happy for Venom because like Venom is the guy I look up to for this universe. Whereas with DC, like I don't know what the fuck they want if they're gonna keep on ignoring the Snyderverse. But
they want Joss Whedon to be the next Superman.
oh my god. Okay, wait, focus, guys. Yeah, but Venom 2 is definitely an interesting film to look into because especially with the beginning, like there's like the beginning itself just seems kind of weird. The rest of the film's tone makes perfect sense. Like it's very consistent. It knows when to be funny and whatnot. Whereas the beginning, we get this like pretty like messed up looking backstory regarding Eddie Brock. I'm sorry, like Cletus Cassidy and Scream, and then and because like a pretty like normal tone war when we see Eddie Brock and Venom meet up with the police officer that captured or helped out in the capture of Cletus. And at one point, when we get on the information regarding who Cletus wants to be with, perhaps in reference to like Scream, as established later on, we get kind of like this strange scene where Venom makes Eddie try to draw like a reference to all the scenery that was on Cletus's walls. But the way it's sped up kind of makes it look more like it's cartoony. Like when they speed up footage for comedic effect on
Yeah,
film, like it kind of felt like that. Like the frame rate was at least all right, but it kind of reminded me of something from a Nickelodeon TV movie, which would be fine if this was like which would be if it was CW. We know like we shot on CW, but for like a live action film on theaters, it just seems kind of weird. And
yeah,
like, I'm not expecting the sped up footage to be more like the Flash and the Snyder cut, but I would have preferred if it was more like on a vein similar to the sped up footage for like when they speed up Farora and Man of Steel. I mean, I know it's a different thing, like its hands and slight movement of the body versus um, the entire human body, like zooming towards an enemy and throwing him around the area. But you get my point.
yeah. Well,
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like the other thing that was weird in the film. That being when uh, when Eddie Brock and Venom listened to the, I guess it's the like letter or perhaps anything regarding what Cletus was saying about where he used to be, his backstory, and like it's kind of like when they make like an opening for Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and it's kind of like where it has all these drawings or like animated drawings of characters. That's what it feels like, and it's well animated. I'll give it that, but it just seems kind of out of place. I mean, maybe it's just trying to be in reference to like the way Cletus drew everything with red ink, but at the same time, it just seems kind of uh, like out of left field. It just seems kind of unusual. Looks more like something you'd expect from like a skit that's meant to be a short film in reference to the film itself. Like it's like some sort of attempt at marketing. Like it's good stuff, but at the same time, it just seems a little out of place. And
Yeah, I
finally,
understand.
the last thing I got to mention about Venom 2 is the runtime. It's actually shorter than
Oh,
the first movie, which I don't know, man. Like, was it meant to be?
you say it didn't like it didn't mean to be like that, or it did.
Like, I don't know if it was meant to be a shorter film because, like, we don't know how many deleted scenes there are, and I don't really feel like going through another like hashtag release the X cut because like I mostly want to say that for films that I think truly deserve it. Like we already know the Snyder Cut deserved it because Warner Brothers was a piece of shit company and Zack was treated poorly, and there's a good cause behind it. Whereas a director's cut of Venom 2, I don't think is that necessary. But it just seems kind of weird that the second film will be shorter than the first one. Maybe it's just me being used to the fact that a sequel usually be a little bit longer. Like I'm not expecting Venom 2 to be 4 hours long. That's fucking ridiculous. But just make it seem more of like a natural option. Like maybe 2 hours and 20 minutes would be serviceable or pretty good overall. It just seems kind of like strange that they would make the sequel shorter. I mean, not to the levels of Justice League severity, but it kind of feels unusual for this to be the case.
Maybe it does have like some scenes that are out, but it probably accomplishes like the vision and the tone that the director wanted to portray. So Andy Serkis should be the one to say, "Yeah, this is not my shit," or "Yeah, this is kind of my thing." We probably left out some stuff, but I like it. So
Yeah,
that that is the main difference between certain directors' cuts and non-directors' cuts.
I can see the argument of that. Plus, Andy Serkis being the director of this film, on top of it being a surprise, like he definitely seems more like the kind of guy that would be creative with the saying. Whereas, as much as I enjoyed the first movie, the previous guy definitely felt more like the guy, like a yes man sort of guy,
True.
pretty much doing what the studio wants him to do. And whereas Circus feels more in control of everything. But one last thing that people are upset about is the fact that this film is not rated R. Personally, I wanted it to be rated R, but at the same time, I realistically knew that they wouldn't do that because, like, the audience for Venom is not exactly the same as it would be for Deadpool. I mean, sure, you got some teenagers and even some kids were brought in to watch Deadpool, but I think that's at the fault of the parents for thinking that because Deadpool's a Marvel film, therefore their kids should watch it.
Yeah, that's kind of shitty because Venom is like one of the main villains for Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is acclaimed by young people like a lot. He gets admired by the little ones. So if you make Venom um, for adults, then that would be inconsistent. Like when the time arrives and the two of them have to clash one against the other, it just won't work in tone. So I understand that it remained PG-13, but I also don't like it too much. Like it's fine. I can deal with it.
The way I see it, it kind of feels like it's more of a hard PG-13, the same way that the Snyder Cut and Zack Snyder's Justice League, I mean Batman v Superman, were like both very soft R's, which
True.
sounds kind of weird to say soft R, but like the main idea is that as far as being R-rated films are concerned, like they don't feel like full on rated R. They feel very soft, which as much as I hate to admit, it kind of sounds like something they do to get people's eyes, but it does the job. I get the idea. That's just the way I see it, though. Doesn't ruin the film before certain individuals think I hate BVS and Zack Snyder's Justice League. No, I don't. I love both films. But the main thing is that the ratings for them aren't as like full on rated R as something like Deadpool or Logan.
Yeah.
That being said, at least this film doesn't have to deal with like the stupid bullshit that some action films had to deal with in the '90s. Remember when people like parents complained about how fucking violent Ninja Turtles was, even though it was more cartoony?
Yeah,
And then
that
they,
never makes sense.
yeah, like Ninja Turtles, the '90s films. Like I know people have cult followings for them and will do anything to like shit on the new stuff, but let's be real here. Like the older films definitely feel more cartoony and nowhere near as violent as something like the new stuff, or even for a better comparison, they won't be as violent as something like um, Terminator or RoboCop. Then again, one film had eventual sequels that were pretty shitty, whereas, well, apart from Terminator 2, because that one's fucking awesome. Whereas RoboCop later on had like a child audience that resulted in RoboCop 3 being sucky.
Yeah.
So, do I recommend Venom Let There Be Carnage? Yeah, honestly, like you can do worse. I just think that if you shouldn't have too many high expectations for this because like I enjoyed my watch for Venom too, but I don't think it's going to be a masterpiece. Like I don't have any high expectations, but I was at least surprised to see some stuff in it, and I like seeing the way Eddie Brock and Venom act without each other because it definitely proves for a fact that they're dependent on one another. I also like the fact that Cletus Cassidy and Scream are a great pair of villains, way better than Riot and Riz Ahmed's character from the last film. I'm just surprised that Cletus died. You would expect like at least Scream to die, but no, both of them are dead. But at least Toxin's gonna show up.
Boom.
It's
Boom, bitch.
it's just kind of like it's just like that's just surprising to me. And of course, we'll see how like Venom plays into the role of No Way Home. Perhaps he'll end off with like Venom accidentally biting Tom Holland's head off, and Toby and Andrew Spider Man are like, "Dude, what the hell?" And Venom would be like, "Oh, sorry about that. I just was hungry for a bit."
I
So
hope they do that in one of the multiverses. Come on.
that'd be funny to see. So overall, Venom 2 is fun, not perfect, but it's good for a few watches. I wouldn't make consider it a masterpiece, but I love me some Venom goodness. Next
Yeah.
up, we're gonna be watching. We're talking about Star Wars: The Bad Batch, which is a spin-off to Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which previously had its like last season on Disney Plus back in 2020. And as a fan of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, I'm kind of content with how The Bad Batch turned out. I will say though that I was kind of like hesitant after hearing some people say that this one character is like SJW or that this story arc doesn't work that well. But setting those aside, I still think that Star Wars: A Bad Batch proves that most of the TV stuff under Disney is better handled than things like the books and of course the movies.
Oof. Yeah.
I think it's no contest. If you were to tell me if I would watch either the Bad Batch or the Rise of Skywalker, obvious answer would probably be just rewatching the Bad Batch because like you get the feeling that at least with the Bad Batch that there's people that are more responsible that they actually give a fuck about what they're making. You,
True. Yeah.
I much prefer to stick with stuff like this than have to deal with bullshit that just pops up to try and make some sort of new retcon that doesn't even work.
Yeah.
But
There is at least one passionate mind behind whatever you're making. In The Rise of Skywalker, you only saw product placements and actors doing stupid shit, and that's it.
and of course, let's not forget the fact that um, Filoni is pretty much a guy that knows that shows his interest. Like you compare him to someone else that claims to be a Star Wars fan, like J.J. Abrams, and oof, that's not even a fair comparison. Like one guy is pretty much at least invested with the stuff. Like he feels like he knows how to like weave like threads within the universe and prove that he's more than just there to make a quick buck, but he's at least interested, very interested, in fact. He's kind of reminiscent of like Derek J. Wyatt from Transformers animated fame, where even to this day, like he's interacting with fans and even like continues making his own interpretations of characters in the animated style. Whereas J.J. Abrams, he looks more like the guy that pretty much say, "Oh, I am a big fan of Star Wars, yet he only just focuses on the original trilogy or New Hope." Like, don't get me wrong, I like the original trilogy just as much as the other guy is, but like, come on, man, like that's not the only thing related to Star Wars that exists. But then again, you got to appeal to like the casuals that think prequels bad.
Sorry, but Lucas has said plenty of times that the original trilogy was meant to be one single story. Okay?
Tobbs, who is that on your side of the screen?
I was just imitating like a Star Wars fan.
Oh, oh man, ruined gag. But anyways, let's talk about the Bad Batch itself. Honestly, I'm kind of happy that it's turned out to be more than just a like a attempt at a cash in for a spinoff because usually you get the mindset that that cash ins like spinoffs like these equal in like immediate like trash. Um, like we already see these with like some franchises where people think, oh, they just want to make money off of it over and over again because like they're running out of ideas or they can't make their own shit. But I think the Bad Batch is an exception because they at least know how to do something that feels like they, like I said, they give a fuck. What first of all, and it feels like it's a consistent quality later thing. I still prefer Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Like you get a way bigger cast of characters with much more memorable stories in them. But I think the Bad Batch is proof that it feels like a nice way to expand on the Clone Wars without trying to override anything. It's like a bonus, but a good bonus. Like
Yeah.
it feels like the good
Uh,
DLC.
to be honest, I was scared at first because I don't trust those spin-offs, but turned out to be alright.
I mean, I don't know if you'd count Rebels as a spin-off or not of the Clone Wars, but you can get the mindset that if you were like a diehard Clone Wars fan, you may initially think that Rebels is pretty kiddie. Then again, people had that sort of mindset with the Clone Wars, but it turns out that Clone Wars was pretty aggressive. It had a lot of war crimes shown, and especially as a
Yeah.
way to argue against the mindset that uh, that it's like more than a kids show. But Rebels at least manages to win people over. But what are we talking about? Let's just find out delve into the Bad Batch. So basically, it revolves around Clone Force 99, the titular Bad Batch of the series, with genetic mutations that we first got to see in the last season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and they're going to be in like extremely dangerous mercenary missions that happen now that everything's done in the last season, as well as the beginning of Jedi Fallen Order, and of course the god tier daddy of Star Wars films, Revenge of the Sith.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yep. Um, Pretty much like these characters, like most of the characters from the Bad Batch, we've already seen a while back. Um, which you may recognize as Hunter, Wrecker, Tech, Crosshair, and Echo. I like the fact that we get more unique clone troopers because you will admit that underneath the helmets they're all the same guy, but it makes sense. I do appreciate that their personalities are different, and of course, they sometimes get to wear some fucking sweet alterations to their clone trooper outfits. I know people love stormtroopers; they think they're iconic, but let's be real here: clone troopers are the fucking beasts. I mean, Stormtroopers are like basic. They're just mid tier. Sure, they may be the more recognizable and the more bankable, but like, come on, man. Like, we're talking about characters, soldiers that are like spawned from the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy, compared to a bunch of guys that wear white outfits. Oh, and also the clones get to wear like I said, different gear. Like Commander Cody, Captain Rex, Commander Gree, Commander Fox, all those guys, like they and their teams of clones are all just like great aspects of Star Wars that make him feel like a bigger force. You don't get that in the Star Wars universe. You just get the same clone troopers. You don't get that in the Empire. You get fucking stormtroopers that look the same from one another, and their voices aren't even that great. I mean, it's like, oh hey, I want to go out and see Tarkin loses uh, stuff. There's no like distinction to them. They're just pretty meh.
Yeah, I get that.
And the same cannot be said for the clones, and that especially rings true for the Clone Force 95 gang. I like the fact that they're also like pretty, like they're tough as nails. They're pretty, like they're like your Suicide Squad. They're your task force. You need them for like the bigger missions without trying to risk too much for your army. And they're joined by the first ever, um, like female clone, that being Omega, which is kind of interesting. Like I kind of find it amusing that they chose the name Omega for this character. Initially, I was worried that they'd treat her as like some sort of like similar character that we saw with like Mary Stu type of individual, like with Ray. But let me tell you that Omega is way better than Ray. I mean, she's mostly there to just be like a bit of a kinship with the Bad Batch, like basically, you know, help them like stick together and whatnot. She's nothing like the others that we've seen for most of these new characters that Disney put in with their stuff.
Yeah.
But like, not saying everyone else has to agree with me on that. If they don't like her, then that's fine. But at the same time, like I think that what she does is like way better than people would initially assume. To be honest, and you may be wondering who returns in this series. Well, there are a few, but like I don't want to go into too many names.
You can mention some to get people
Yeah.
intrigued.
Well, we pretty much see like Lama Su as the one of the main like leads of Camino, the planet that involves the creation of clone troopers. We also get to see the return of characters such as Bib Fortuna, surprisingly, Emperor Palpatine and Darth Sidious. Well, same guy. I just kind of found it funny they made them sound like they're like separate characters. Tarkin shows up, and we even get to see Cad Bane, who was a fan favorite of Clone Wars and is still one of the best characters in the franchise.
Oh, holy shit. Didn't expect him.
Me neither, but like it works. I can't complain too much. It just like I mean like if you want to have like someone like a famous Clone Wars character to show up, make it him. As far as the story is concerned, I do like the fact that we get into some of the like grungier missions. I mean, of course, we have seen clone troopers and Jedi and other heads of the Republic deal with similar adventures in the past. But I think what works with the clone like with Clone Force 99 is the fact that they feel like there's no way out of them, but they somehow survive. Like, think of it as the A team of Star Wars. Jesus, seeing the X of franchise based on their culture is kind of weird, if I'm being honest. Yeah, like I just kind of like whenever I see like a nerd reviewer be like, oh, like oh, Kevin Feige said this is like the Godfather of Marvel films. Like, come on, dude. I know you want to try and win people over, but most of your audience is going to be like either teenagers that don't care, or nerd adults that pretend to like other films but just do it so they can make this look like they're adulting. And B, no, it's fucking not like that. Come on, Feige, do better. But anyways, I appreciate the fact that we get into some of the grunge missions. I mean, I'm pretty sure people are still gonna be like, "Oh, well, why can we have ourselves like an R-rated Star Wars story and whatnot?" But like, I think this may be the closest to it because uh, it definitely adheres more to the Clone Wars fans that have been around with the series for so long. Um, well, then again, because this is a Disney Plus exclusive, I mean, people that are new to Star Wars with the Bad Batch can always watch the older episodes of the Clone Wars. I mean, it's not hard; it's like right there.
Yeah.
There were a few moments that definitely felt like they were inspired by previous events, but I appreciate the fact that they're able to make them sound like memorable for one another. For example, when it comes to them trying to keep Omega safe from any sort of threat, at the very least, it doesn't sound quite as repetitive. Like there's at least some sort of tensity that's going on when it comes to them trying to escape. Like at in some instances, very last minute moments. Don't forget the fact that there's also a time where they try to seek refuge from everyone else, or when they were stranded on the moon after like they had damage on their ship. Plus, we also can't forget that the time they were able to like help Jabba the Hutt at one point.
Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, kind of reminded me of when Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka had to like rescue Jabba's son, which
Yeah,
in a
I
movie
remember
like
that.
all right, I don't know if we reviewed the movie or not, but I'm gonna be honest and say that definitely like the movie for the Clone Wars definitely felt more like a kids film based around Star Wars compared to the rest of the series. Like I understand what the point was, but it's still kind of funny. Like it felt more like a direct to video adventure.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of the series is actually pretty fucking good. I mean, I don't think you need to see the movie to
No, you actually don't.
yeah, like you don't really need to. I mean, because like Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the series doesn't even need it. Like you don't have to watch the movie. I mean, you could probably enjoy it. You may like it still, but like nah, just give like if you want to get into the series, just watch the fucking TV show, man. It's like much more, it's much better overall. And then you can watch the Bad Batch too because it's actually really good. And if you want to, maybe you can watch Rebels. Who knows? Like I won't judge if you like Rebels. I mean, it gets better.
Yeah, it does get better. But do you remember when that Clone Wars movie released? Everyone hated
Yeah, that's
Ahsoka,
what I'm getting at.
and now she's like literally the best written character in the whole universe of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, I was a different audience member back then because like I was pretty much like watching her and thinking like, okay, she's this cool character. She may seem like she's there for marketing, but I didn't think of that back then because I was thinking to myself, oh yeah, Star Wars. But yeah, she definitely grew into a different character, and I know TV shows and movies are different, but you don't really get that sort of mindset with like the Disney trilogy because it just feels pretty shallow by comparison.
Yeah,
And thankfully, we can say the same thing for the Bad Batch, especially Omega, because, like I said, many were pretty concerned about how Omega would turn out compared to her male counterparts. But I personally think she turned out all right as a character. I have no like significant complaints. Maybe she may not be as significant, but Like she's way better than what we had to deal with other Disney era characters. Ugh, Disney era. Using that for Star Wars instead of Power Rangers just seems strange.
Yeah, they are everywhere, even in your underwear.
Oh no. Well, one last thing to close off on. Um, I'm not sure if we're getting a season two or not, but if we do, I hope we get to see like a progression. Maybe like continue off with, like how it would all tie in with the what would become the original trilogy. I mean, obviously, I don't want to see like the Bad Batch somehow like be responsible for an event that happens in A New Hope because I'll admit I kind of got annoyed when they tied in the ending of Rogue One to A New Hope. Like that was so fucking desperate, man. It's like it's like okay, you guys are making fun of us now, making fun of the audience because they love A New Hope. It's like it's kind of cool when Darth Vader showed up, but the fact that they established this happening right before New Hope just seems kind of like they're making fun of us.
Yeah, I mean, at first nobody was expecting that, and then yeah, maybe it was a bit of a cash grab. I don't know.
Thankfully, you don't get this sort of mindset um, with the Bad Batch because it's like much better handled overall. And I have to say that kudos to everyone behind the show for making it more than just a like basic ass tie-in. Like you get that there's a passion behind it, and best of all, it feels very worthwhile.
Well, that's a big positive.
And can I just say one last thing about it? Like it feels good that we get ourselves like more interesting stuff. But I'm going to be honest and say that it's kind of interesting how Star Wars under Disney is like because it either goes from actually having some really good content to then having some frustrating content to then back to good content and bad content. But hey, that's what happens when you
Yeah,
give a franchise like this to a fucking mega corporation. Maybe it's not the corporation itself that's the issue, but the people behind it. I
well,
don't
don't.
like.
Patty Jenkins is gonna direct the next movie, so don't worry.
Yeah, no thanks.
Oh,
Uh, I'm just
but
remember.
but but Jody's Corner is gonna show up.
Yeah, can he be the guy that plays some like protocol droid looking guy that just tries to sound generic? I'm trying to avoid specific words. Like they're gonna probably make his characters look like some sort of marketable gimmick character that has one personality, and the soccer moms and all the stupid ass political websites are gonna make him say, "Oh, he's like a stereotype." It's like you fucking idiots did this to yourself. But yeah, thanks for reminding me that we should review Wonder Woman next year and talk about why it works compared to the shitty 1984 film.
Ugh.
Don't worry, you don't have to watch it again. Just watch the first one. Some stuff is going to be weird in it, but you'll be fine.
Yeah, maybe throw up, but nothing worse than that.
You can do this, big guy. You can do this. And finally, we'll be taking a look at Transformers Robots in Disguise, or as some fans call it, Car Robots, which is in reference to what Takara called the older Diaclone toys that were later used for the Autobots as well as Optimus and Ultra Magnus in G1. Now,
So, wait, here we're talking about the anime version of Robots in Disguise, like the old one.
yeah, the other one back in March is the sequel to Prime, which is not an anime, but like your normal American cartoon. It's like
Mm-hmm.
cell shaded CGI with like a different frame rate for stylistic purposes. It's like it may not look like a sequel to Prime, but it is, which kind of annoyed people because they wanted a proper sequel, not a spin-off, which is kind of reminiscent of how people got upset about Rebels after the Clone Wars got canceled.
Yeah, it's a good parallel.
But Robots in Disguise was, or aka Car Robots, is like while it may seem like an ordinary series for Japan, is quite significant in the United States and the rest of the world, and for good reason. Now, you remember my thoughts on Beast Wars and Beast Machines, right?
Yeah.
I thought that they were pretty good, and I also appreciated the fact that they were all in the Generation One universe without them like making it the main point of them. Because
Right.
nowadays people try so hard to dick ride G1 that it's gone sickening. Whereas back then in the '90s, like they were first focused on making a good show, and they make the G1 references look like a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, initially, Hasbro was going to make a third part of the Beast era, which brought in Generation 1 and Beast Wars together, and they would have called it Transtech. It would have had like techno-organic transformers that were more in line with what we got back then. Like there was an Optimus Prime that was kind of like got very beefy proportions, and his like truck mode would have looked like a gorilla face somewhat. Shockwave was going to be brought back. So was Starscream. Like it would have been a new, interesting combination of ideas from Beast Machines in Generation One, but um, Hasbro reportedly had poor sales for Beast Machines, and the show was not well received at the time. So they had to try and come up with something new in the background, but they needed product for Transformers quickly, and so they
Figured.
and so they brought in car robots from Japan, dubbed it into Robots in Disguise, and released it in 2001. Now, let me tell you some stuff about car robots real quick. In Japan, I don't know if they established this as either like its own thing or as part of their version of Generation One, which is messy as balls. But in the U.S. and the rest of the world, Robots in Disguise is the first ever proper Transformers reboot.
All right.
Yeah, like before then, it was mostly just Generation One. Then it was Generation Two, and then we had the Beast era, which was with Beast Wars and Machines. Before in 2001, and they decided it was time to refresh everything with Robots in Disguise. And let me tell you, it was kind of a surprising thing back then because nowadays we can expect a new like cartoon to show up in Transformers. And that's been an establishment ever since like we started to get into like reboots. But at the time, it was kind of like new ground in a way, and it was also the first hand drawn Transformer show since, well, if you want to count it the Generation 2 reruns, because Beast Wars and Beast Machines were CGI. But here's the thing, Robots in Disguise was an anime. It was not an American cartoon like Generation 1 and the other stuff was. And on top of that, it's the first Transformer show or anime to be dubbed in the US officially. Headmasters, Master Force, and Victory may seem like it, but those were like initially um, released in certain English-speaking Asian countries that were dubbed poorly by um, Omni Productions, not to be confused with Optimum Productions, the company that's dubbed '90s Sailor Moon. But
I mean, that that is some history.
yeah, and the crazy thing is that like Robots in Disguise was not only the first reboot, but also brought in new ideas and like gave a refresh to older ones too. So
True.
we bring back the Autobots this time around, and they face off against the Predacons. But the Predacons are the replacements of the Decepticons, whereas the Decepticons are a subgroup. They were initially a group of Autobot protoforms that were later programmed to become evil under Megatron's control. And the basic good guy and bad guy premise is similar at first, but it has a few differences compared to what we see before. Basically, the Autobots are more like your typical police group, like your Justice Division team or whatever, whereas the Decepticons are more like a group of gangsters, not like the significantly big factions between the two war um, mongers, I guess, in previous fiction. And I believe Cybertron is still alive in their universe, because in the other fiction, it's pretty much loss of energy.
Huh?
Yeah. And what else can we say? Like, it's definitely crazy to delve into stuff like this because, like, no one was expecting it to be that that's different from what we're used to. Everyone else was pretty much like under the mindset that thought, oh hey, um, like what's this series? Then we get into a more um, like in-depth look at how things work, and like it starts to make sense because like Robots in Disguise is definitely more like your different show, and it kind of works in a way like he has its identity. Um, I don't know how to best put this, but it's quite on par with a lot of other anime released in the early 2000s and late 90s. Like, you know how there's this big anime boom that happened around that time, thanks to stuff like Toonami and Pokemon and Fox Kids, how they have all this sort of attention to anime, and it resulted in people trying to look for all this stuff.
Created a boom, you're saying?
Yeah, it's like an anime boom for the 2000s. Like,
Mhm.
like I know anime came out way before, in the stuff like Speed Racer and Voltron, but it was an even bigger boom in the late 90s and early 2000s because like these guys were like fascinated with the animation, the style, the characterizations, the music, and with the growing access to the internet, people were like obsessed with looking up information, posting fan art, making fanfics. And Transformers
True.
Robots in Disguise it quite was like one of those examples. There's still a website to this day devoted to RAD called RAD Forever, and you have like scans of the magazines and images of character bios and episodes themselves. Because, like as you mentioned earlier, like Robots in Disguise has quite a bit of a historical significance in Transformers mythos, but for good reason. Again, apart from all that stuff I mentioned, but more so for the fact that it was a great way to reinvent Transformers.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of cool, and the way you put it gives more gravitas to what it means in like the whole scope of it.
Yep. I won't go into too many of the characters because unfortunately they have way too many Autobots and way too few Predacons and Decepticons. So I'll
Ah,
go over.
crap. That
Yeah,
one's
yeah, that's quite sucky. But Optimus Prime is your typical Autobot leader. Like he's all right in this. His voice is more kind of gruff and kind of like not as emotional or as soulful as Peter Cullen or Gary Chalk. Like Peter Cullen is obviously Peter Cullen. I mean, it's come on, it's like describing what water tastes like. But Gary Chalk is a little more interesting because he established that his primal voice for Beast Wars is more like a caring father, whereas his Armada Prime voice is more like a military commander. And Gary Chalk definitely made that distinction quite clear when it comes to his fictional appearances. Yet Neil Kaplan's Optimus Prime voice is kind of like a mix between Peter Cullen's and Gary Chalk's. Unfortunately, because he didn't have as much significance in other fiction as the other guys did, you don't quite get that same level of like impact unless you were like a full on RID like viewer. And hell, like he's not even as as significant to most people as compared to David Cage's Optimus. And David Cage has voiced Optimus in one season or one series of Transformers that being animated. Yet people still remember his voice. And maybe it's because he's a more youthful Optimus. Yeah, it's probably that.
Maybe, yeah, it's probably because of that.
But I still like his performance, like or his incarnation of Optimus in RID, and I like his design as well. Like he's a fire truck. Now, granted, Optimus Prime fire trucks are like somewhat common back then, but and even though he's not as like important to me as Cybertron Optimus from the Unicron trilogy, because that figure looks beautiful and the design is just great to see on the CGI somewhat. But that was the first Optimus Prime to be a fire truck, as well as the first Optimus Prime to have a super mode. Well, if you count Power Master Optimus, but people remember him from the comic books made by Marvel instead of the animation, because the Generation 1 cartoon barely had Power Master Optimus, and only then it was in the live action segments that had like a huge puppet of Optimus. Next, we have the Ottawa Brothers, who are consisting of Prowl, X-Brawn, and Sideburn. The first two are kind of reinventions of the Generation 1 Autobot cars. Prowl being a more samurai-inspired police car, or police Autobots. Definitely, like, apart from the color scheme and the name, like, they're very different from each other. G1 Prowl has got that, like, 80s, like, robot feel to him, but still looks nothing like a GoBot nonetheless. Like, he looks like a humanoid robot. He looks like a proper being from another planet that turns into a vehicle. Whereas RD Prowl, he's way stylized and way distinct. Not even the head sculpt is similar because Prowl is like a more like 80s style head in G1, and in RD he's got that like sleek anime look to him. And of course, X Brawn in G1, Brawn was a mini bot that had a very stocky look to him, whereas in RD, the front of his hood or his vehicle mode is his left arm.
What?
Yeah, it's kind of like funny how that turned out, but you get my point. Because
Yeah.
Transformers designs were quite creative back then, and it's just funny how things will like unfold, if you ask me. But after all this, we're not quite done yet because we also have the Spy Changers, which are Autobot mini cars that all transform the same way. They're not that significant in terms of role. The only ones I can remember most are um, like Ironhide and Mirage, simply because A, they're also featured in other fiction, and B, Ironhide and Mirage are friends, and C, there's an episode where everyone thought Mirage betrayed them, like in G1. That's pretty much
Uh-huh.
it. You also have Team Bullet Train, which consists of Midnight Express, Rapid Run, and Rail Racer. Or was Rail Racer the combiner team? Uh,
Speed
Rail
Racer.
Spike. Rail Spike. Yeah.
Oh.
Like they're like this bullet train trio of Autobots that have social robot modes, very nice looking train modes, and they combine it to a super robot named Rail Racer. They're all right, but but they also have to be with another Autobots combiner team, that being Landfill or the Bill team, which consists of Wedge, who is an orange excavator, Grimlock, who is a green shovel, and nothing like the Dinobots from G1. Yet nobody gave a fuck about them because apparently that sort of shit can only be put towards Michael Bay because G1ers suck. Um, Hightower, who is a crane, and it looks similar to Heavy Load, who is like a similar vehicle. I kind of forgot what Heavy Load was like in that series, but oh well. And you might be thinking, are there any Decepticon combiners that are on par with them? Well, not quite, but we'll get to those soon. There was a few like Autobots that can also like have a spring-loaded transformation, but they're not as significant apart from Toadline and Skid Z because they have solo episodes of photos to them. But the more significant Autobot would likely be Ultra Magnus. Now, in most fiction, he's pretty much a good friend of Optimus Prime, or in the case of animated, a mentor. But in RID 2001, he was his brother. One of the few instances where it's clearly established that Optimus and Magnus are brothers. And here he hates Optimus because he wants to be the Autobot leader.
I mean, I agree.
And it's kind of like good stuff to see the dynamic between the two. But what makes it even more interesting is the fact that Magnus thinks he can control the power of the Matrix when he combines with Optimus and become Omega Prime. However, what he doesn't know is the fact that Optimus is still in control because he was designed to possess the Matrix, and the fact that he already has super mode. So basically, Ultra Magnus is just a super mushroom. It's not like he can be Venom, where he can control the Brock in some instances. He's just armor. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the Autobots. Oh yeah, there was Fortress Maximus, but he's just a repaint of the G1 guy. And yeah, a lot of did you know that a lot of like toys in the fiction were pretty much repaints of older characters?
No.
All right, Optimus, Magnus, the Autobot brothers, um, Team Bullet Train, and uh, Build Team are new molds as well as Megatron. They were designed as new characters in the series, and they had new toys for the start. The Spy Changers are repaints from Generation 2. The Flip Change guys, Skidsy and Toadline, are repaints of Machine Wars Scout basic class figures. Megatron's new mold is established earlier. Um, he's like got the ability to have 6 modes. I mean, he has robot mode, he has like dragon mode, he has jet mode, he has a hand mode, a bat mode, and I think a tank mode. I don't recall. Like there are so many similar modes. It's just a gimmick to make him like fly off the shelves easier. But when he becomes Galvatron, he not only gets a new paint job, which was beginning the trend of Megatrons becoming Galvatrons just by repainting themselves. Well, for a little while, it stopped in Cybertron. But he gained 4 new modes, which I don't care much about, to be honest. Like they're just like it's just rearranging him slightly to be different. Like who cares? He's still a good toy either way. It's just like you don't have to cram in all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And everyone else is and the Predacons are repaints. Uh, Slapper and the other Night Scream and Gas Skunk are repaints of Beast Wars figures. Skybite's a repaint of a Transmetal 2 figure. But like interestingly, they're the first time we get those characters in fiction in terms of animated appearances. Same thing for the other guys. Um, the same, however, cannot be said for the Decepticons or the Commandos. Scourge is typically like he was pretty much a reprint of Generation 2 Laser Optimus Prime. A cool looking reprint nonetheless, but he's clearly a reprint of an Optimus Prime. And uh, that's not an issue because Optimus Prime's laser form was never in any fiction, animated, or in Marvel comic books. The Commandos that become Ruination are clearly repaints of the Combaticons from G1. You have Mega Octane from Onslaught, you have Rollbar from Swindle, you have Armorhide from Brawl, you have Rotor from uh, Vortex, and you have Movor from Blastoff. And like a lot of the figures were pretty much made either around in 2000 or were repaints from Generation 2 and Beast Wars. No problem. But when you make your only bad guy combiner team a repaint of a Generation 1 combiner team, that's clearly biased, bro. Like, like landfill and rail racer are brand new molds. They have articulation added into them. Ruination is a repaint of Bruticus, an old combiner toy with articulation in the arms, and he's way smaller. How's that fair?
Don't know.
Yeah, thankfully the Combiner Wars or Unite Warriors line did make a Ruination set or Baldigus because Romanization, but man, I feel bad for the Predacons and Decepticons for having more repaints than the Autobots do. Now, all that aside, what do I think of the show? Well, it's alright. I mean, it definitely has like the more comedic aspect to it. Like it feels more like your traditional kiddie anime feel for a Transformer series more than anything else. Like it's totally different from Generation 1, which is pretty 80s, or Beast Wars and Beast Machines, which are clearly 90s. Robots in Disguise is more on par with like the kiddie, like the anime boom at the time. Meant to be on par with stuff like Digimon, Pokemon, etc.
Yeah.
The story is pretty much on point with what we saw before. I think what makes people like remember it for what it is the fact that it being an anime, apart from the boom that happened as we mentioned before, it's got quirks of its own. I mean, it definitely gave us like the way we see the Transformers transform from stock footage. I mean, in Generation One, they pretty much like would transform no problem. Whereas in Beast Wars or Beast Machines, they usually have to say like insert name, transformation code, like Optimus Primal Maximize or Waspinator Terrorize. But they don't require like any flashy backgrounds or dynamic transformation sequences. They just do it on the fly. And in Robots in Disguise, the characters usually say their name and they say transform, which I have to say is pretty satisfying. But we don't have to hear them say that every time.
Transform, transform,
Yeah, they did
transform.
that a lot in the Intercron trilogy, which is pretty annoying. But it is kind of amusing how it turned out. Although I will say that the Predacons at least like spice it up a bit by saying like terrorize. But it is kind of weird to see that your Autobots are like their vehicles and your Decepticons be animals. It's just kind of funny. Maybe it's meant to be in Japan in reference to the fact that they try to like talk down on the poor sales of Beast Wars figures made after the first season with Return of Vehicles. I don't know, but it's kind of funny how it turned out nonetheless. Uh, it's also known for the comedy in the series. Now, in the US, you pretty much had to like downplay some of the humor to make it more appropriate for North American audiences. But honestly, who cares? Um, Jokes aside, you get stuff like characters that have like those steams from their like those anime looking steams from their heads when they're angry, or when they sigh. They have like a little like bubble that shows them sighing, or those little like dashes of lines that are on their heads when they're shocked at something. They even remove visual enemy gags. Like at one point, when Optimus Prime talks about what happened to Sideburn in Japan, Prowl and X-Brawn lose their composure and faceplant, whereas in the US, they remain calm. And of course, um, in another episode, in Japan, whereas Mega Octane's head would grow very big to yell at Movor when he's in space, they don't use that gag in the US. Instead, they just show um, like repeat footage of like Mega Octane talking to Movor using pan shots or using the different grid screen of sorts. That makes sense. I might be making this too confusing because Robots in Disguise is one of the more like difficult franchises to talk about compared to everything else, isn't it?
Yeah, it is actually kind of hard to catch up with
Yeah.
from all previous ones. I'm struggling like a lot.
Okay. I'll try not to like go on too much about specific details. Another big thing that they changed is the fact that we have CGI segments where the Autobots would go on the space bridge to transport between different parts of the world, but they replaced the background of like the simple bridge with CGI to make it look more cool and dynamic. It does its job okay. I mean, it's way better than the Cybernet Space Cube from Generation 2, but it's kind of funny. It's like when you do green screen for your anime characters and the CGI backdrop for those like shit posts.
Yeah.
Another CGI related changes when you know how they sometimes show like the point of view of a transformer when it's all very like technological looking. It's more common in the movies, and even Bumblebee showed it all look kind of different in Bumblebee. But in Robots in Disguise, it was a simple like camera view with hand drawn stuff, whereas in Robots in Disguise, the border was CGI and it looked more mechanical, which I think kind of gives it a little bit more of an alien look to them. I think people would kind of like say this is very similar to how the '90s, like the first two seasons of Sailor Moon, were handled, where they would like give new transitions, replace the music, and make it seem like it's a different show in a way. That's kind of how the way I see it when I look back at Robots in Disguise, especially in the music side of things, because the music in Car Robots was your typical like anime music you'd hear. It's trying to be very dynamic and whatnot, whereas in the U.S. It was made by the same people that did a lot of other background music for Saban shows. I think they also had the same composer for Power Rangers at one point during like pre-Disney era, but post Mighty Morphin in space. And it definitely has that early 2000s feel, which is like mind blowing because it definitely takes me back to when I was like looking at this like anime boom. Even though I was like more interested in stuff like SpongeBob and whatnot.
Which makes sense kind of for that time.
Yep. But unfortunately, the most like well-known aspect about Robots in Disguise is the censorship I had to deal with because, all right, RID in 2001, right, Car Robots was released in 2000. No problem. RID was released in 2001 in September. Unfortunately, it was released too close to the untimely events of 9/11, which,
Oh,
yeah.
crap.
Remember when I talked about how Time Force had to censor itself?
Yeah.
Because like for certain episodes are released nearby the events of 9/11.
Yeah.
A lot of media was like that. The Spider-Man teaser trailer, you're familiar with that. They had to remove the Twin Towers digitally, or
Yeah.
pull, or they had to like remove the like the teaser that had the Twin Towers and the helicopter. Uh, Lilo and Stitch. There was a scene initially planned to be put into film that involved them flying around in the city, but that was removed because it was they didn't want to make it similar to the Twin Tower casualties. Um, what else would work? Is another example? Apparently, Monsters Inc. was going to have a scene where they blew up the restaurant instead of like putting everyone in quarantine when they saw a human. Like,
What
oh,
the hell?
yeah, yeah, that was planned at one point, but they had to go back and fix it before the movie came out.
Dang.
Yeah, and
That's very true.
yeah, and you get to get that sort of feeling about how things were handled back then because a lot of media was censored and like that was still a case for some stuff that was either re-released in at the time it was or at the time that the events were still fresh. Obviously it's like relaxed now because like we're way past 9/11, but it was kind of monumental for television because stuff was either untimely, like pulled from air scheduling, or had to be edited significantly, and Robots in Disguise was like censored at times because buildings were being destroyed and Like they didn't want to like upset people or for being reminded of the casualties of 9/11. And yeah, I think that was like it's not car robots or robots in disguise's fault because like there's nothing they can do. They had no choice. Now, with that being said, um, like unlike Time Force, which you would expect them to have like the original broadcast intent, like the original releases of the episodes that were not censored because we're way past 9/11 for their home video releases. I don't think we can say the same thing for Robots in Disguise for one reason. Can you guess what it is?
No.
I'll give you the answer. There has not been an official DVD release of late, or ever in the United States. Like,
Never.
yeah, the United States never had home video releases for some reason. Like, I know the United Kingdom and Australia have the full DVD box set of the entire series, along with other Jetix shows released at the time, like RoboCop, the animated series, for some reason. Yeah, Fox Kids and Jetix were confusing in other countries as much as they are in the US. Let's be real here. And you might be wondering, wait, what's Jetix got to do with Transformers? Well, okay. You know how remember when like Disney bought Fox Family Network at one point in the 2000s to make ABC Family?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um that was one of the like that was more well known for resulting in stuff like Jetix happening and for having Power Rangers transfer from Fox Kids to Disney, where we saw like Power Rangers on Disney on ABC Family, on ABC Kids, and Toon Disney and Jetix from reruns of older episodes as well as new ones like Wild Force, Ninja Storm through RPM. Before I think Overdrive stopped being on ABC Family, and Jungle Fury was on Jetix and Disney ABC Kids. Was RPM was only on ABC Kids because Disney didn't want nothing to do with Power Rangers. But they also had Digimon from Fox Kids. They also had um, the Fox Kids Marvel shows and Beyblade.
Beyblade.
Yeah, let it rip. Yeah, they had all that stuff on there because those shows were on Fox Kids and Disney. Like when the contracts were still going on, like Disney gained access to the shows, but they put them on because like some of them were either like they're just get more viewers' attention, or in the case of like Power Rangers because they wanted to continue filming the series but go cheap with filming in New Zealand, or for the Marvel stuff because well Spider-Man and X-Men had movies back then, so they put them in there. But you might be wondering what happened to Transformers Robots in Disguise. Well, Disney, even though they seemingly own the rights to the series, they did not bring it back. There was no reruns. Now, I have two hypotheses regarding this. One, because Disney had no idea that they had Transformers Robots in Disguise as part of the package deal. I mean, they put more attention on Marvel, Power Rangers, and whatever anime was on there than RID. Or two, because they know that Cartoon Network had another Transformers show that was airing at the time, that being Armada. So they likely didn't want to confuse audiences and thinking that there's two different shows running in two different channels.
Yeah, okay. That starts to make sense.
Yeah, especially since Armada was like that was like it's like since Armada starting with Armada although they did like put Beast Wars on Toonami back then, but Armada was when it started to become a more established home for Transformers because like Armada, Energon, Cybertron, um, occasionally they put the first movie on TV, and they would also rare Robots in Disguise on Cartoon Network and Cyberverse now. Like Cartoon Network has been the default home for Transformers shows, with the exception of Prime because it was on Hub, and Rescue Bots because it was meant for a younger audience. So that makes sense in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't stop there because Robots in Disguise 2001 was likely bought back by Saban during 2010 when he bought back Power Rangers along with a couple of other shows. The problem is, nobody still knows if RID was one of those shows or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's weird. Like, you would expect them to at least think, oh, like, we got this series, like, why not we use it again? But at the same time, like maybe they didn't care because it's Transformers, but maybe they should because like, well, the movies were big, and like you would expect them to you'd expect them to at least be more like interested or invested in using these episodes, but maybe like they didn't want to do anything because like they were upset that Transformers took all this attention from them. That's my theory. But to make things even more confusing, Hasbro bought almost all of Saban.
Whoa. You
Yeah,
see that? Yeah.
yeah, like they bought Saban back in 2018 when they bought Power Rangers. Like initially, they were going to be just the master toy maker of Power Rangers when um, back when it was announced that Saban and Bandai were going to split up. But now Hasbro bought the entirety of Saban brands, or most of it, anyhow. They own a lot of other IPs, presumably, but we don't know what they're going to do with them. Like, I think they own some of Digimon. I think they own, like, whatever Glitter Force is. I think they own Goosebumps, the 90s dub of Goosebumps, or, like, 90s version of Goosebumps. I dub Goosebumps is on anime. But they own stuff like Big Bad Beetleborgs, VR Troopers, Mystic Knights of Tyrannog, a lot of other Saban produced shows. But we don't know what they're going to do with them because Hasbro cares more about Power Rangers right now. It's like the big brand. Um, and of course, Toei is involved, and I think they're going to split up from Toei in the future. But once again, no mention of robots in disguise. And it's weird too because Hasbro owns Transformers, and you would expect them to try and use robots in disguise as a way to get people interested in its re-release, but sadly, no. I mean, they made a Voyager class Skybite figure in Thrilling 30. They made a repaint out of Laser Optimus Prime into Scourge. And they also did a few, like, they brought Scourge in for Skybite and Cyberverse. But for some reason, like, they don't care about bringing back RID, and it's quite clear when they did that because nobody fucking paid attention to its 20th anniversary. Like, no one in Hasbro was like, oh, hey guys, 20 years ago, Transformers Robots in Disguise first aired. They're more like, oh, hey guys, like, check out this re-release of the 1986 movie because that's all you fuckers give a fuck about. Come on, Hasbro. Like, I know you people want to suck the dick of the G1 movie, but give some love to the, like, to Robots in Disguise 2001, for God's sakes. Like, I know I praised the movie. I know I said it's way better than that shitty Netflix series, but, like, come on now. Give some love to your underappreciated franchises. You're doing good with Armada when you made a poster devoted to Armada and SDCC along with Beast Wars, G1, and Bumblebee. But that was one step forward, two steps back, guys. But
Yeah.
that being said, there's a lot that we can say about Robots in Disguise. It is important. Well,
Yeah.
like I said before, um, it's pretty much the first reboot we ever got of Transformers. The first it's the first anime that was officially dubbed in the United States. The first one to rewrite a lot of mythos and make it its own universe, and it resulted in itself being quite important. While other fans may not have much significance in it, or perhaps they may be more interested in stuff like, well, like G1, this and that, or whatever else was new at the time. Um, a good majority of fans still enjoy it because, like, if they have seen it in full, they like it because it feels unique to the franchise, or more importantly, it was important for the mythos changing, and most importantly, it was a way for Hasbro to like step into new ways of rebooting the franchise without feeling scared because they've been so used to one continuity that now they're really ready to do more and visually distinct ones as well because RID was different from the Unicron trilogy, which was different from the movies, which was different from animated, which was different from Aligned. And now we have this like mindset of a brand unification and making everything look in line with each other. I mean, have you seen uh like Cyberverse and stuff like Rescue Bots Academy where it's all like the look where it all looks the same?
I don't think I particularly seen that, but
Well, they mostly stick with
what's
the evergreen designs, and to put it lightly, I just prefer when they used to be more creative with their franchises. But maybe one day we'll have people that care about Transformers beyond just trying to be obsessed with G1. I mean, it's cool we're giving Beast Wars attention, but it just sucks that the Beast Wars Return was just in the shitty Netflix stuff, and it's also a comic book. But thankfully, history cannot be rewritten, and they'll always remember Robots in Disguise, one way or another. I still hope we get a DVD re-release at some point. Maybe not with Shout Factory, but hopefully on Hasbro Pulse.
Yeah, they should embrace everything that is related to Transformers.
Yep. And that about covers today's episode. We hope you get to see this one as soon as you can because, well, you never know when this will be uploaded, but more importantly, hope to see you guys next time.
See ya. This will get censored, and it will be all worthless.
But more importantly, take care, everybody.
Wait, don't forget to subscribe. If you do, I'll give you a headbutt. That's Ogre for thank you.